by the end of the year. The Labour leaders challenged the Prime Minister on the UK's rising energy bills, which he says are due to pressures before Russia invaded Ukraine.
The typical energy bill is going up by £700 next month, and that's because of pressures before Russia invaded Ukraine. The Chancellor's solution? A forced £200 loan for every household, paid back in mandatory instalments over 5 years. The big gamble behind that policy was that energy costs would drop quickly after a short spike. That bet now looks certain to fail. When will the Prime Minister force the Chancellor into a U-turn?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, the Chancellor has set out plans to help families with energy costs, with unprecedented measures to abate council tax by £150, Mr. Speaker, in addition to all the other schemes that we are putting forward.
The Ukrainian president says his country has shown it will not surrender to Russia. The UK Ministry of Defence says Russian troops have not made any significant breakthroughs as fighting continues to the northwest of the capital. However, 4 cities are encircled by Russian forces and they continue to suffer heavy shelling. Meanwhile, in the air, Ukrainian air defences have so far prevented Russian fighter jets from achieving any degree of control. President Zelensky told Ukrainians only short time separates them from freedom.
All the cities where Ukrainians are resisting, where they are protesting against the invaders. No, we stand with you. We are grateful. The cargo will still go, no matter how many bullets stop them. Humanitarian corridors will still work, and only time separates you from freedom. Short time. Believe in it. I believe.
Russia has said its troops will stop firing on the capital, along with 4 other cities, to let civilians evacuate. Well, the city of Sumy, their regional governor, says the humanitarian corridor will continue after 5,000 civilians were evacuated yesterday. Yulia Gritsenko escaped Kiev and is now in the Lviv region. She says some Ukrainians are spending most of their days in bomb shelters.
In the other regions, the situation is quite grave now. People are sitting in the shelters from almost all day, and why there are no many footages from citizen journalists and so on. It's just because not always you can go out and take some pictures because you just may die.
Boris Johnson said the number of Ukrainian refugees coming to the UK will rise very sharply to hundreds of thousands, and that further routes to welcome them here will be set out in the next few days. Ukraine's ambassador to the UK said his officials would help deal with the refugees if the visa rules were lifted. But the Transport Secretary told GBNews checks must remain in place.
It takes a bit of time to sort of crank up the system to make sure that we have visas and checks in place. Your viewers will understand we do need to check who is coming here for obvious reasons. But we've cranked up from just 800 appointments a day to 6,000 available.
A 7-year-old boy has made history today by becoming the youngest person ever to present a petition to the Scottish Parliament. Callum Isted is making the case for every primary school pupil to be given a reusable water bottle. He told the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon that it would help reduce plastic waste. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Liam for today's On the Money.
Energy exports from Russia, the Kremlin's imposed counter-sanctions, putting its own ban on a whole host of commodity exports, including fertilizer and food. It's more than 2 weeks since Russia invaded Ukraine, and oil and gas prices have surged, pushing up fuel and energy costs, not least for motorists. But food prices are also surging, given that Russia and Ukraine are major crop exporters, and now anyway subject to a near universal global shipping ban. What does this East-West conflict mean for you and your family? Plus, each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Well, today we're talking to Pedro Torachilis, who runs a Madrid-based recruitment platform trying to address the shortage of tech workers here in the UK. It's a fascinating story. Plus, we separately talk cybercrime, an issue of increasing concern as Russia squares up to the West. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read some of your mails later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News on TV and DAB plus digital radio. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, Joe Biden's confirmed a complete ban on Russian oil, gas and coal exports to the US. The American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's leadership, said the president last night. Britain, too, has said we're phasing out the use of Russian energy over the coming year. The EU, dependent on Moscow for 40% of its gas supply, with Germany up at 60% reliance, has yet to make the same move. Global energy markets have inevitably reacted again to this international ban on Russian energy, something we didn't even see in the days of the Soviet Union. Motorists are getting used to spiralling diesel and petrol prices, with £2 a litre now a distinct possibility. But this East-West economic war extends way beyond energy, not least to food. Russia and Ukraine are major producers of wheat and other crops, millions of tonnes of which are shipped out via the Black Sea, which is now mired in conflict. And many leading sea freight lines are anyway refusing to handle goods originating from Russia. All that's causing food prices to spiral upward, which means attention's turning to UK domestic production. But with fuel and fertiliser prices soaring, farmers' costs are spiralling upward too, which makes homegrown food more expensive as well. Fertilisers made from a mineral called potash, produced in vast quantities by Russia and its ally Belarus, but now also under export embargo. That's why fertiliser prices around £600 per tonne as recently as last week are now hurtling towards £1,000 a tonne as farmers panic buy and both gas and potash prices surge. We're suffering serious agricultural inflation, said the National Farmers Union. And how? That's why, as fuel and energy costs soar, shoppers can expect prices to rise at the supermarket and corner shop too. Yes, we can grow our own food, and in Britain we produce 40% of our own fertiliser. But this East-West economic war means farmers' energy costs and the price of gas and potash used to make fertiliser, well, those prices are skyrocketing. So that's our On the Money debate today. East-West economic war, the impact on family food bills. Now, today we're joined not by one, but two farmers, Gareth Wyn-Jones and Steve Evans. They're both in Wales. In the studio, we have financial advisor Louise Oliver. Great to see you back in the studio, Louise. And a long-term friend of the show, John Longworth, chair of the Independent Business Network and former head of the British Chamber of Commerce. Let's talk to our farmers first, if we may. Gareth, tell us about those fertiliser prices. Tell us how important fertiliser and fuel prices are to farmers who are trying to make a living.
So last year I was buying my fert in for about £240 a tonne. I've just bought some in now at 640, and I'm really glad that I did. I pre-ordered it and prepaid for it, but we're hitting nearly on £1,000 very, very shortly. I spoke to another friend of mine. He thought it's going to be up to 1,300-1,400 by, beginning of the summer. So scary, scary times. But let's not forget that half the world's food production is reliant on artificial fertilisers. So we are going to have a massive stopgap somewhere. I was speaking with two farmers this morning. They are talking about cutting their stock to half. So selling half the cows and half the sheep, because they're very heavily reliant on fertiliser. I'm lucky where I am. We're not heavily reliant on it. We can put our fertiliser number and keep the stock. But there is a massive, massive number of farmers in this country that are so reliant on it. And that's what's been giving us, cheaper food. And we're not just talking about livestock, we're talking about everything we grow in this country will need some kind of fertiliser. So it's scary times, and it's about time government policy started to address this, started to look at seasonal local food chains, started supporting agriculture a lot more instead of giving us a hard time. And the cost of diesel on top of that, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And the only people that are going to be paying and suffering are the people that are consumers and customers. And, we will not be able to produce any cheap food anymore because the cost is going to go through the roof for everybody.
Steve Evans, another farmer in Wales. Everybody, of course, knows that Russia exports lots of oil and gas, but who knew that Russia exported, and Belarus, lots of potash used in fertiliser, lots of potassium oxide, all these feedstocks for fertiliser that farmers use. Are you seeing the same thing that Gareth Wyn-Jones is seeing?
Yeah, well, we farmers knew how much fertiliser came from Eastern Europe. It seems that a lot of the political parties didn't fully understand how much actually came from there. I'll just give you some of the financial implications on our farm. So January, we do the budget every year. And compared to last year, we were looking at about £181,000 difference in cost between feed, fuel and fertiliser compared to last year. We've redone the budgets again yesterday. It's now £249,000 more than last year. So it's not a small amount of money. Granted, milk price has crept up to mitigate some of these costs. However, there is such a gap coming now between cost of production and sort of income. It's getting out of hand, and food shortages are a real issue coming down the line. Without wanting to scare too many people, it's a genuine issue, okay?
Oh, Gareth Wyn-Jones there, Steve Evans, two honest-to-goodness farmers. They know their stuff. John, you used to be a director, I believe, of Tesco, of Asda. You know this market well, the British market for food. Yeah. You also know how reliant we are on Russia and Eastern Europe in general for crops, for the base feedstock into fertiliser. We seem to have got ourselves into a bit of a pickle.
Well, we're in a pickle anyway on energy management in the UK. It's been a running disaster on successive governments. I mean, I know one food manufacturer, for example, who contracted for gas supply before Christmas, normally paying £200,000, now paying £400,000. Wow. That's before the Russian crisis. Yeah. And that's all because of a very stupid government policy to choose the most expensive route to net zero. Now we've got on top of that the whole business of the economic war with Russia and Belarus. And if we're not careful, we will be heading for stagflation. We'll be seeing what we saw in the 1970s.
The economy turns down with high prices.
Yeah. Double-digit inflation and on CPI, not RPI. We're talking about potentially 15% CPI.
That's Consumer Price Index. That's generally at the moment the lower measure of inflation.
Correct. And that doesn't include, of course, RPI includes mortgages, which could be a big issue as well, because the Bank of England will raise interest rates to try and dampen down inflation. Sounds counterintuitive. It actually adds to inflation in the short term. So we've got a real issue here. And it's good that this programme's highlighting that it's not just about consumer prices for petrol, for gas, for heating, electricity and all the rest of it.
It's the supply chain.
Business and the farmers have got a problem, but then the supply chain in between the farmers and the consumer also are paying excessively high prices for energy. So everything's going to go up in price.
Louise, as a financial analyst, as a shopper,
Yep.
What do you make of this? Spiralling food prices. We've heard it from the farmers.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really scary. And one of the things that I worry about is we don't want to go panic buying again, do we?
No.
Because we'll be hearing this on the news. You're thinking about, well, wheat prices are up 50% in the last month. I don't normally follow wheat prices. I find myself looking at the futures thinking, what impact is this going to have on us going out and buying a loaf of bread? The answer is massive.
And it's not like we can just turn to homegrown consumption, production, because as we've heard from our farmer colleagues there, the price that they're paying for their fuel, they're paying for their fertiliser, that's going through the roof. And when it comes to farming, fuel and fertiliser are pretty much your two biggest costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all need to be careful how we shop as well, just to make sure that we don't waste food in the future. And, you know, we do need to look at maybe sustainable farming. We already had the supply chain issues, didn't we, with the fertiliser anyway.
As we were coming out of the pandemic.
So this has been exasperated. So it's you know, it's really difficult. And I think the government will need to step in, perhaps look at maybe reducing the duty on the petrol that we put in our cars.
Scrapping the VAT.
Scrapping the VAT, yeah, because that would help people reading energy costs. It's difficult to find anything positive at the minute with regards to household bills.
Gareth, let's go back to you. What do you think when you listen to the radio and television and hear politicians who maybe have never thought about fertiliser feedstocks and nitrous oxide and potash and all the rest of it, throwing around bans, international embargoes on global trade?
They're living in cuckoo land, to be honest with you. Nobody's talking about the crisis that's going to hit, you know, the farming industry, and that is going to knock on to the shopper and the consumer and the businesses. There's a business in Wales, Castellhowell. He's talking now that his bills to carry the food around is going to go up to 2 million. You know, these aren't massive companies, but it's going to hit them really, really hard. We need a farming food revolution in this country. We need to be looking at seasonal, local food that's travelling less. We need to be producing more food in this country to feed our nation in a healthy, sustainable way and environmentally friendly. And do you know what? I'm hearing so many people are talking about rewilding and planting trees, solar farms going everywhere. Where the hell are we going to have the food, the fields and the earth to grow our food? We have to start pushing our politicians. We have to start knocking on their door, and they have to start listening, or this country will go hungry very quickly. This is going to be a global problem. Let's not forget it. This is not just going to happen in the UK. This is going to be global because, you know, half the world food is produced with artificial fertiliser. For God's sake, doesn't that make people wake up? Even if we, you know, lose our transport, everybody's going to have to eat every single day. We're going to have to feed this nation. So please, please listen to this now before the tap that's been feeding everybody with the food sustainably, affordably, is really starting to be switched off. We have to wake up.
Strong words
Get
there
that
from
farming food revolution going.
Strong words there from Gareth Wyn-Jones. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll keep this discussion going with our two farmers from Wales, with John Longworth and Louise Oliver in the studio. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. I'll read out some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:21. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. So we're discussing this East-West economic war, the impact on family food bills. We're here with our two Welsh farmers, John Longworth, former head of the British Chamber of Commerce, and Louise Oliver in the studio. We just heard from Gareth. Let's go to you, Steve. You're in West Wales. Gareth gave a very impassioned statement there, series of statements about the need to preserve our food security, about the need to wake up to our reliance on fertiliser, on escalating farmer costs. What would you say if you were in an elevator, a lift with the Prime Minister, Steve?
Oh, you'd have a job to shut me up, to be honest. Right. I think you've got to remember in all of this as well that between 30 and 40% of all food produced is wasted, okay? It's wasted from within households. So firstly, we need to look at what goes on within our own back door, per se, and just see, shop a bit smarter as well. Because just purely from my point of view, unless prices realign with cost of production quickly, then we are not going to be able to waste anything because it won't be about. You've got so many farmers that have cut back in the previous 12 months. There's red tape, bureaucracy, sort of restrictions on the amount of manure we can spread, when we can spread it, things like that, especially here in Wales. Plus then you've got a deputy climate change minister which wants to take 10% more land out of production again to plant trees on, which to me just doesn't add up when the country's only 60% self-sufficient. So in amongst all of this, we have a real problem. We have a real problem. And what would I say to the Prime Minister? I would say, look, you have people in the countryside that want to farm. People want to farm, okay? I farm, I enjoy it, all right? I've got horizontal rain today instead of vertical rain, but, we enjoy what we do. Gareth's the same. We are people of the countryside. We do what we do best, and that is produce food. And it feels like...
Hold that thought, Steve. John Longworth, I want to come to you. You have been a director of some of our leading supermarkets. Farmers like Steve and Gareth, they're working hard to make ends meet. Farmers do often get a hard time from the supermarkets themselves. What can our massive food retailers, many of whom did pretty nicely during lockdown, by the way, given that they could stay open and a lot of the corner shops couldn't stay open, what can they do now to help ordinary people deal with the food price implications of these sanctions on Russia?
Well, the one thing they're really good at is managing supply chains. I mean, fortunately, we've got some really professional, large organisations that have global reach and are very used to doing it. So they can switch, for example, wheat supply, because we can't produce wheat everywhere in the UK, to North America, to Australia, and so on. So that, and no, we're not in the European Union. That's much easier.
Yeah.
We can
because we're not tied to that common agricultural policy.
Exactly.
And we can tax food the way we want to.
We can tax food the way we want. We can become completely energy self-sufficient if the government stop doing these mad policies on energy. We can, of course, bring more production into the UK, instead of paying farmers not to produce food, let's pay them to produce food. So that they can do. They can switch, of course, to GM. I mean, we've actually, a lot of people don't know this.
Genetically modified food.
For decades, we've been supplying genetically modified animal feeds. The idea that actually genetically modified human food is bad is completely bonkers. We could use less fertiliser if we were actually producing GM products, which Britain was a leader in, and we can switch more animal feed to GM, which means that we can actually get it cheaper because we can produce it in parts of the world it wouldn't otherwise be able to be produced in. All that sort of stuff. And of course the VAT on fuel you mentioned. The block to that, believe it or not, bizarrely, is Northern Ireland Protocol. Because the government won't show up Northern Ireland as being not part of the UK.
That is another story. Louise, this is causing a rethink across a range of issues. The Business Secretary is about to stand up. The Prime Minister may be about to lift the moratorium on fracking. We may re-embrace genetically modified food, as John Longworth says. We may even treat our farmers a bit better.
We may do. It's a shame, Liam, isn't it? It's taken a crisis to wake up to this, wake up to being self-sufficient on energy, and also to support our farmers. We need to support our farmers, and I think that if we're buying British, people will gladly pay just a few more pence or whatever it takes for the food in the supermarkets. And also, if we're buying here in the UK, we're lowering our carbon emissions, we're not ferrying it in from Europe, we're cutting down on fuel costs. So it totally makes sense, but it's not going to happen overnight. So whether we all adopt the good life, planting our own, get the allotments going, we might see some of that. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Stranger things have happened. Well, thanks for that fabulous discussion. We had Gareth Wynne-Jones and Steve Evans, our two Welsh farmers. We'll have you both back on the show again soon as we monitor fertiliser prices, we monitor food prices here on The Money. With Louise Oliver, with John Longworth. Fabulous to get your insights, both of you. Now, with the cost of living continuing to rise, fresh food and veg are also now feeling the effects of unstable markets. This is even playing out in everyday products that we may have thought safe from this East-West economic war. Fish and chips, for example, are now among the ever-growing list of foods that are likely to see price rises. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has more.
Early morning in a Belfast veg market sees lorries being loaded with product that is rising in price. Brian Dean is the sales manager for the North Down Group and points to numerous factors.
This rising costs started with Brexit, the amount of extra administration we had to put towards the whole job. We now have 2 dedicated salaries just for the main paperwork exercises that's done on a daily basis. That on top of the rise in fuel costs, packaging costs, the cost of labour, the cost of fertiliser, our growers are seeing increasing costs, and all that inevitably gets added on to the end user.
Access to fresh food is a must in any modern economy, and David Kerr is a retailer that travels from Kirkcudbright on a daily basis and has noticed families' spending patterns changing to try and make money go further.
Rather than buying a 2 kilo bag, they're coming in now and buying a 20 kilo bag or a 10 kilo bag to hopefully last longer. They're spending their budget more wisely.
Brian Dean says a stronger pound is helping with purchasing power from the EU, but that could go either way.
We are benefiting at the minute. Obviously the euro and pound exchange rate's good. It's good for us buying stuff on the continent. So that's what's keeping the cost down slightly. But it just takes the euro and pound to change, and then again, your landed cost is going to increase.
Potatoes is a big part of British life, and fish and chips is probably the best loved product from them. Trevor McBride has owned his chip shop for 28 years and sees real financial pressures on the industry and points to taxes and wages that are due to rise in April.
I'm here 28 years. The golden chip has been here over 40 years. And no, I have never seen as bad an outlook as far as expenses is concerned. We're facing it every day. Everything's gone up. And we're looking at April with the VAT going back up again to 20%. And that goes on to all our food, everything that's heated. There'll be 20% of VAT to be paid from that. and minimum wage going up, living wage and so on. They need that to go up for to be able to survive. But no, I have never seen as poor an outlook in 28 years, no.
Got this. Prices may go up, but the taste never changes. Dougie Beattie, GB News, Belfast. Well, hello, Liam, and welcome to a barn in Ballygan, County Down. Behind me is the fertiliser in question that they've all been talking about. It is nitrogen. I heard your farmers before this talking over £600 a tonne. Unheard of. I've been around agriculture all my life, and that is absolutely shocking. We reported a few months ago, I don't think anybody else really touched it, on red diesel and how it's not being allowed anymore, only in agriculture. So lots of those frozen food lorries that are coming across with goods in them, the compressor units in them would have ran with red diesel, now having to run white diesel. That's putting the price up. And shockingly enough is Ukraine, because of where it sits in the Carpathian Mountains, it takes the natural minerals off those mountains and brings it in. And for root vegetables growing, particularly potatoes, it's perfect for them. And they're in the top 5 or 6 growers in Europe. They supply much of Germany, much of Belgium, Italy with their potato crops. Now, Great Britain has a great opportunity here at this moment to increase the crops that they have, and we may well be able to put that into the markets in Europe. The problem with that is, of course, they need some of this nitrogen fertiliser behind us. I also heard some of your farmers talking about spreading slurry. Slurry can't be spread in Britain under European legislation between the 16th of October and the 2nd week in February. So all these legislative powers need looked at, and Britain can maybe help themselves at this point get out of a bit of a sticky situation with food security.
Interesting, alarming, concerning, very informative, Dougie. Dougie Beattie there, our Northern Ireland reporter from County Down. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, I'll be talking to tech entrepreneur Charles Dellingpole about his new financial crime report, which shows UK businesses are more concerned than ever about cybersecurity. And today's In-Depth Money Talks interview is with the co-founder of a Madrid-based company who's aiming to revolutionise tech recruitment amidst a global shortage of tech entrepreneurs, not least here in the UK. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, Ukraine's foreign minister has called for an urgent ceasefire to allow power to be restored to Chernobyl. They've said radiation could be leaked if an electricity outage continues. Russian forces are now occupying the plant, and Ukraine says it's not possible to restore power whilst fighting's underway. Boris Johnson says the number of Ukrainian refugees coming to the UK will rise very sharply to hundreds of thousands, with further routes to welcome them set out in the next few days. Ukraine's ambassador to the UK has said that his officials would help to deal with refugees if the current visa rules were lifted. But the Prime Minister says we must have checks to avoid unnecessary security risks. Meanwhile, Downing Street has announced that a new visa processing centre in Lille will begin accepting appointments from tomorrow. The Labour leader has challenged the Prime Minister on the UK's rising energy bills, which he says are due to pressures before Russia invaded Ukraine. It's as UK drivers are being hit by the second largest daily hike in diesel prices for more than 20 years, with an average cost of a litre at now a record 165.2 pence. The UK has promised to phase out Russian oil by the end of the year. A climber has died on Ben Nevis in Scotland. Rescuers work to help 17 people stranded on Britain's highest mountain. It's the third fatality in the region in the last 5 days. You are now up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and radio. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:37. And now it's time for my daily interview series, Money Talks. The tech industry, of course, is crucial to the UK economy, an increasing source of employment and tax revenues. But it's been reported that over the last 5 years, more than 70% of technology employers are experiencing skill shortages. Now, the Madrid-based recruitment platform Circular is hoping to expand into the UK market, having secured $10 billion in new funding. Founded in 2019, Circular provides direct access to tech talent. And here to tell us more from Madrid, it's Pedro Torachilis, CEO and co-founder of Circular, my latest guest on Money Talks. Pedro, great to have you with us. First, I beg forgiveness. I've obviously marmalised your very beautiful surname. Could you just pronounce it correctly for us, please?
Yes, of course. It's Torrecillas, not an easy
Oh,
one.
not bad, not bad, not bad, not bad. So, Pedro, tell us about your business. Why did you found Circular in 2019?
Yeah, well, basically, we realized that in-house recruiter were already sharing candidates with each other in close communities or informal way. And we thought that was a behavior that makes sense. Everybody won. The candidate being recommended got shortlisted into a great opportunity. The recruiter doing the recommendation improved their employer branding. And obviously, the in-house recruiter receiving the referral gets a great talent lead. So we went into a mission of making this existing behavior into a mainstream thing, making recruitment collaborative.
Now, obviously, Spain, where you are, has a pretty developed tech scene. Paris is a big tech hub. There are tech hubs right across Western Europe. London also attracts huge amounts of tech investment, as does that whole corridor, which you'll know well, from London to Cambridge, the so-called Silicon Fen. How big an opportunity for you is the British tech market, and how acute is the shortage, Pedro, in tech employees here in the UK?
You were mentioning, Liam, at the intro, 70% of UK-based tech companies are facing this tech talent shortage. For us, UK is a strategic market because it's the most sophisticated one and one of the most, if not the most competitive one. in Europe for sure. So we believe that we are creating a new way of recruitment, and if we can make it work in the UK, we can make it work anywhere.
To young people or maybe their parents watching this show, what would you say about the prospects for youngsters who are thinking of getting into the tech sector? What should they be doing? What kind of qualifications should they be trying to get? What kind of experience should they be chasing to make themselves employable and hopefully people who can command good salaries going forward?
Yes, of course. I would recommend anyone, any youngster out there to get into tech. This is going to be growing for at least a decade. And lucky enough, it's easier than ever to learn tech. You don't have to do it even in uni. You can do it in yourself, self-taught. There's a lot of platform out there. You can also get involved into boot camps. On the other side, remote trend, which is great, has also made it a little bit more difficult for junior developers, software developers, because particularly smaller companies and startups don't have the time or the resources to teach these young people in remote and rather go for more senior profiles. But bottom line, I would recommend anyone to get into the tech industry right now, particularly as a software developer.
So Pedro, you're obviously Spanish, you speak wonderful English, you are clearly extremely knowledgeable and interested in the UK. Honestly speaking, a lot of people will be wondering this as we have this conversation. Do you think the fact that the UK is now outside the European Union has undermined Britain's status as a tech hub, a leader in tech across the world?
I don't think so. I think it has made more difficult for the UK to hire talent because visas obviously are a thing now for hiring tech talent across the world, but still London is the reference for any European entrepreneur and any European tech professional as the main hub.
That's really interesting. And what's your vision of what you can do here in the UK? Just briefly, Pedro, as we finish the interview, how big an opportunity is this country for your company?
I mean, again, for us, the UK is strategic, particularly London. Let's not forget that still cities and living in cities, even in this distributed world, are very important because they limit the mobility of tech professionals. So London as the main hub and having 8x number of tech companies that compared to Madrid is the biggest tech hub that we can dream of.
And you will know, of course, there are tech hubs up on Tyneside, up in Manchester, down in Bournemouth on the south coast, in Cornwall and Devon, in Cardiff. Lots and lots of tech hubs in the UK. Pedro Torachilis, I hope I got that right. A bit better.
Yeah,
of Circular. All the best with your business and great to have you appearing here on
Thank you so much for having me, Liam. Bye-bye.
Talks. All the best, Pedro. Now, in a related tech story, a major new study of financial criminality suggests UK businesses are more concerned than ever about cybersecurity. The State of Financial Crime Report 2022 found that 80% of firms filed more suspicious activity reports in 2021 than the previous year. And they identified Russia, China and North Korea as the three biggest geopolitical threats. Cyber protection providers are currently working to prevent financial crime and threats online associated with ongoing events in Ukraine and Russia. Here to tell us more in the studio is another tech entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Compliant Advantage. It's Charles Dellingpole. Charles, great to have you in the show.
Awesome to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. We're having a little sort of tech moment here on the money. Pedro, and now you. Cybercrime, Russia, is it a big deal?
I think in the past 2 weeks, you've seen how critical it has been. So Compliant Advantage on the front line of being able to freeze assets for oligarchs, for Russian banks, and be able to prevent and detect all the criminality coming from North Korea, from South American mafias. And I think in the past 2 weeks, we're processing now 4,000 transactions a second. We're protecting 200 million underlying clients, 2,000 clients and companies directly from that. So I think it's never been a more challenging environment for companies to be able to fight against financial crime and terrorism and also implement the threat against sanctions for Russia.
Now, you're obviously an entrepreneur too, Charles. You've set up your company, Comply Advantage, that supplies these services, and good for you. If you run a small business, could you be at threat? We've got so much of our businesses online, our accounts, our payroll. If you can't get broadband, it's almost crippling, isn't it? If you get actually attacked over the internet, it's much, much more concerning. What can small businesses do?
So I think, to your point, it's very, very challenging because issues like money laundering, cybercrime, they can affect every area of the economy. And particularly what we've seen is things like money laundering are attacking areas like estate agents or high-value goods dealers like car parts dealers. And there are so many different conduits for money laundering and terrorist financing. And so that means that every single company has to be aware of the risks and implement the appropriate measures to be able to counteract that. So it's a huge challenge for very large companies and small companies alike.
The entrepreneurs we have here on the show, we like to get to know them a little bit. So how did you get into this space? Did you muck about with computers in your bedroom when you were a kid? Were you always going to be an entrepreneur? Have you surprised yourself by being an entrepreneur?
This is my third company.
Wow.
My first one when I was 16. We've now raised 110 million for Comply Advantage. We've hired people all over the UK. We're now nearly 400 people.
It's very impressive.
We have teams in Manchester, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Bristol, so all over the UK. And I don't think this company would be possible without the infrastructure and setup that we have here. And we now service 80 countries around the world. So we are a very global company based in the UK.
We just heard from Pedro Torachilis there. I'm improving. Yeah. It's the third time of pronouncing it. I wonder what you thought of that one. Obviously, he's a Madrid-based entrepreneur. He was kind enough to say that London is the centre of tech here in Europe, and Brexit isn't stopping us from progressing. Okay, we're two Brits, right? But without blowing our trumpet too much, how good is the UK at this stuff? How important are those regional tech hubs that I spoke about? Up on Teesside, Middlesbrough, down in Bournemouth, in Manchester, as well as just London?
So I think the UK has amazing universities, amazing tech talent. So primarily, we're an AI and machine learning company, and we have big teams in Manchester, in Newcastle, and there is really world-class talent educated here, built here, that's really evolved here. And I think that's really why we've grown so well and why we've been able to become a world-class company, competing all over the world and winning from the UK.
Now, are the people that go into tech, are they all kids who did maths, physics and chemistry, A-level and a sort of degree in computer science? Or are there more artistic people who may be focused on economics or history or even English when they were at school? What kind of people do you end up working with? And what kind of a broader range of people do you look for when you're making big employment decisions?
So what we're doing very heavily is investing in earlier talent. So we want people who are slightly more junior in their careers, but primarily what we want is people who've worked elsewhere. So perhaps they've been working for 5 years in Asda or Lidl and want a kind of big career change. And we'll take them, we'll be able to train them up. And we have enough senior talent with our 300 engineers now to be able to train them in new techniques and be able to really advance the technology. But primarily we want people who are clever, ambitious and determined. So there isn't really any prerequisite for kind of a cultural or academic background.
I take my life into my hands. But you don't always want geeky people, if you know what I mean, by really sort of scientifically, mathematically focused people, or do you?
So I think what we do is very, very complex. So it requires people who can communicate well, clearly understand, and it really is a team sport. So, and it's at the end understanding the underlying dynamics of money laundering, terrorist financing, Russian criminality, and then being able to apply that into technology, into code. And given the scale at which we operate, it really has to be people who can communicate well, think well, and then be able to execute.
Now, we know some of the greatest computer engineers in the history of man have come from Eastern Europe, from the former Soviet Union, all those maths Nobel Prize winners and so on. Do you fear that we are going to see a spike in cybercrime now, given this sort of standoff that we've never seen in our lifetimes between East and West?
I think we're already seeing it. I think in terms of the sheer scale of money laundering and cybercrime with North Korea, with the blockchain, I think now the technological foundations of cybercrime, such that you can exfiltrate money from hacked Bitcoin exchanges all around the world to nefarious regimes, means that we're already seeing that. It just isn't necessarily visible or present in our everyday lives. So I think that threat not only is a huge problem going forward, but it's already here.
We've been talking about high food prices today and high energy prices, and now we're talking with you, somebody particularly expert, about cybercrime. Let's try and cheer up a little bit. What's good about tech? How can tech help us as Brits, as people wanting to make their lives here in Britain? What can it do to help ordinary men and women?
So primarily what we do is we have a database of 15 million bad people. So money launderers, human traffickers, sex traffickers, people who are kind of at the very vanguard of evil. So what we're trying to do is really, we as a society have failed to eliminate evil in the past 200, 300 years. And finally, hopefully, with technology, we can make that difference and crack down on crime and all the underlying precedent issues that make that possible. So I think if there is a way to make society better, it's through the elimination of evil and using technology to be able to facilitate that underlying goal.
That's really interesting. Here you are, a young man who's obviously making hugely successful strides in building a big business, tackling tech-based crime, but you're also saying that tech can be a force for good. Tech can be a way of tackling crime, eliminating crime, even maybe changing our character?
Precisely. So I think previously what you have is huge teams all around the country in banks, payment companies, trying to sift through the issues with people who are exfiltrating money from banks, payment companies, and historically we failed. So the reason why I started the company was to be able to finally solve that problem. And the only real way of doing that isn't by throwing more bodies at the issue, it's by hopefully using technology to automatically find the problems and the issues.
What's your background, Charles, if I may? What did you study at university? Did you even go to university? Because a lot of the best-known tech entrepreneurs, they either didn't go or they dropped out halfway through.
So I taught myself how to code when I was in my teens, but then I did politics at Cambridge. And then worked in banking after that. But
that's interesting. You did politics. That surprises me, but it kind of chimes with what I said earlier, doesn't it? Politics is obviously, it's a humanity. It's not a particularly precise subject. It's obviously a very complex and worthwhile subject. You didn't fancy maths or physics, even though you were coding. Why was that?
I was doing enough of that in my free time. Yes.
What's the vision for your Comply Advantage company? How big could this get? Is there a danger you could get too big?
Yeah. So I think really we're tiny compared to the potential of what we're doing. I think in terms of market share, in terms of potential, in terms of the roadmap of technology, I think we're still at the foundational stage of our company.
Charles, I'm afraid we've got to leave it there. Charles Dellingpole of Comply Advantage, great to have you on the show. And we're leaving this interview, which I've much enjoyed, thank you, because we're crossing to the House of Commons, where the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Kwasi Kwarteng, is updating MPs on the Russian oil ban.
I'd like to make a statement on the UK phase-out of imports of Russian oil in response to Vladimir Putin's brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine. The UK joins key allies, including the United States, in halting the import of Russian oil, which makes up 44% of Russian exports and 17% of the government's revenue through taxation. This action follows the most punishing set of sanctions that the British state has ever imposed on a G20 nation. Our trade, financial and personal sanctions are having an effect on the Russian economy. The ruble, as I speak, has now fallen by nearly 42%, and the Moscow exchange's stock trading has been shut since the 25th of February. The British government has sent a clear message to Putin's regime and to those who support him in his war against Ukraine. It is important to remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Russia produces only a fraction of the fuel products currently imported to the UK. In a competitive global market for oil and petroleum products, demand can be met by alternative sources of supply. And as a result of international revulsion at Putin's invasion, Russian oil is already being excluded from much of the market and currently it is trading at quite a sharp discount from other crude oil sources. But we want to go further, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday I set out that the UK is phasing out imports of Russian oil during the course of the year. This transition will give the market, it will give businesses and supply chains more than enough time to substitute Russian imports. Businesses should use this year to ensure as smooth a transition as possible so that consumers will not be affected. The government will work with companies through a new task force on oil to support them to make use of this period in finding alternative suppliers. Yesterday, I spoke with businesses, unions and representatives from the sector, and of course, I and officials in BEIS will continue to engage and support British business. While Russian imports account for 8% of total UK oil demand, the UK is also, one should remember, a significant producer of both crude oil and petroleum products. We participate in a global market for these products, and we have resources in place in the unlikely event of supply disruption. Over the course of the year, the task force we set up will work closely with international partners, including the USA, the Netherlands, and the Gulf, to ensure alternative supplies of fuel products. Last week, I addressed the International Energy Agency, and tomorrow we will have an extraordinary meeting of the G7 energy ministers to discuss further steps. While businesses should do everything they can to source oil from alternative sources, they will still be able, it's important to emphasize this, they will still be able to import Russian oil during this transition period. These measures target oil-related products imports only. The UK is not dependent on Russian natural gas, making up less than 4% of our supply. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be exploring options to end this altogether. I want to make clear to the House that we fully intend and we must end our dependency on all Russian hydrocarbons. In the meantime, we need more investment in North Sea oil and gas production as we make the move to cheaper and cleaner power. Turning off domestic production, as some are calling for at this moment, would be completely the wrong thing to do. We're not going to do it. The Prime Minister has also confirmed that the government will set out an energy strategy to explain the UK's long-term plans for greater energy security, including both renewable and nuclear power, building on our 10-point plan. This measure and those being taken by our allies in terms of the phase-out, the oil phase-out, will move the West away from a dependency on Russian oil. It will take us on a road to building a stronger, more resilient British energy system. It will also increase the growing pressure on Russia's economy and will ultimately hamper Russia's ability to impose further misery on the Ukrainian people.
At Miliband.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are united against Russian aggression. We stand together in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, and let me echo the admiration he expressed for President Zelensky and his address to us yesterday. His bravery and eloquence was both extraordinary and inspiring. On the Secretary of State's immediate decisions, we know that Putin's war machine is being funded by oil and gas. That's why it's right for every country to do what it can to isolate the regime and every company to do so. So we fully support the government's decision to ban oil imports. It is a right and welcome step. And it is right also to work with the companies and unions on how we implement this policy. I'd like to ask the Secretary of State in his reply, maybe he could tell us what assessment he has made of the impact of the ban on petrol and diesel prices. We also support him in his decision to seek to find ways to rid ourselves of Russian gas imports. And I want to ask him about the wider energy security context to his statement, which he talked about. But I think it's essential that we learn the right lessons from this crisis. Although 50% of our gas comes from the North Sea and only 4% from Russia, We pay the same price for our own gas as that which we import because we operate in an integrated gas market. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are absolutely exposed to the rocketing wholesale gas prices that we are seeing, currently up 100% on the month and 800% on the year. The right lesson to learn is therefore surely that we have to go much further and much faster in developing homegrown zero-carbon power, including renewables and nuclear, which can free us from the whims of autocrats and dictators who can use fossil fuels as a geopolitical weapon. Does the Secretary of State agree this is the right lesson and that policy will need to change? In particular, does he agree we should finally end the effective moratorium on onshore wind in the planning regulations, which has denied us power each and every year since 2015, equivalent to our gas imports from Russia? Does he agree we should ramp up our offshore wind so we go well beyond 40 gigawatts? And does he agree, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's time to finally get serious about energy efficiency, the best way of cutting energy demand, and where the government has not succeeded in the past years? On the North Sea, Madam Deputy Speaker, there needs to be a phased transition, but will he now clarify the government's position on fracking? And will he confirm that the moratorium that was put in place will remain in place? No ifs, no buts. No ifs, no buts, as fracking would not make any difference to the prices consumers pay, is dangerous and would take decades to come on stream. They don't agree with me. I've got a position against fracking. They support fracking. We'd love to know what the Secretary of State and the government thinks, and I'm sure they would too. Finally, let me ask him about the cost of living crisis facing families, arising from what is happening to oil and gas prices. We have consistently warned the government that their measures were wholly inadequate for the rise in energy bills. I asked the Secretary of State today, will he undertake to tell the Chancellor that in his spring statement he must come back with much, much more help for both families and businesses? Let me end by saying this, Madam Deputy Speaker. We are united in our support for people in Ukraine. We will support the government in everything it does, which can cut off support for the evil and barbaric Putin regime. And we urge the government to learn the right lessons from this crisis for our country so we can achieve both energy security and energy sovereignty.
State.
Deputy Speaker, in his customary way, he raised a large number of questions, the majority of which I hope to deal with. In terms of his words against Putin's barbaric invasion, his completely illegal actions, I'm very pleased that he's reflecting our sentiments, and we have a mutual interest in making sure that Putin fails. As far as the cost of living is concerned, Madam Deputy Speaker, there was an extensive intervention by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I think it's quite wrong for opposition politicians to say that the price cap, which will be set in August, is going to necessarily be higher than what it is today. We simply don't know. He will understand that the price cap will be set at a time retrospectively looking at the average price. It may well be higher, but there are circumstances in which it won't be increasing as much as he imagines. And of course, as is always the case, we have an ongoing look at the price cap. We speak to Ofgem all the time, and Ofgem is engaging work in terms of how the price cap is calculated. In terms of the North Sea, I'm pleased to hear that he's very keen to support investment in the North Sea in terms of making sure that gas is a key transition fuel. That's something which I think many people on the benches opposite may disagree with. And of course, he's absolutely right to stress an increased focus on renewables and nuclear power. We are absolutely at one in our agreement on this.
Robert Jenrick.
That was Kwesi Kwarteng, Secretary of State for Business, and indeed Ed Miliband, his Labour shadow, former Labour leader, of course, talking about the Russian oil ban in the Commons. Thanks for joining me today here on The Money. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. looking at how this East-West conflict impacts you at home. Now here's the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 4 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the loss of power at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine will not have any critical impact on safety. That's according to the United Nations nuclear watchdog. The statement comes after Ukraine's foreign minister called for an urgent ceasefire to allow power to be restored over fears that it risked releasing radiation into the air. Russia seized control of Chernobyl last month and is now in control of the plant. Boris Johnson says the number of Ukrainian refugees coming to the UK will rise